Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I know that we have folks that have already been through the Digital Defenders training with us, and also some new faces that are learning about Digital Defenders for the very first time. So welcome everyone. I'm seeing around 100, number slowly rising, amount of people that are here tonight. Thank you so much for your participation and for being here to talk about what we can expect on the internet and how we can be responsible activists, talking about the election, what to expect, sharing accurate information online leading up to November 3rd and also beyond. Samantha, I would love if you can just give a quick snippet as to the closed captioning or any other details you want folks to know.
Yes, hi, welcome. If you are using closed captions today, there's a link in the chat that you can click on and it will bring you to closed captions for this webinar.
Perfect. On to the next slide, please, Allison. All right, everyone. We have a quiet chat box today, which I am surprised by, but I want to know who you are and where you are calling in from. My name is Noor. I am the Digital Advocacy Director over at the Women's March. And my pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm calling in from DC, which is just buzzing in anticipation of next week. And Allison, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everyone, I'm Allison. I'm also in DC. I'm the Women's March Digital Defense Content Strategist. I'm making graphics and things to proactively fight against bad actors on right wings, trying to spread disinformation and how we can fight that in a more direct approach.
Perfect. Thank you, Allison. And I know that we have our guest presenters today as well, Christina and Kelsey. I'm going to let you introduce yourselves right now, actually, if you just want to give folks an intro.
Sure. I'm Christina Wilfor, calling in from DC, and I am the Senior Director of Disinformation Defense at the Strategic Victory Fund.
And I am Kelsey. I am also calling in from DC. I work at a firm called GQR, or Greenberg Quinlan Rosner, and I am working with a bunch of researchers to monitor for political disinformation in this cycle, and then to help groups figure out sort of the best ways to defend against it. So really happy to be here.
Perfect. So for context, everyone, this is one of many trainings that we have been doing actually over the past year. And I'll dig into that a little bit more to tell you about our process and why we're here. But before we do that, I'm hoping that we can actually move to the next slide, Allison. And for you, Samantha, to launch our poll, if that's all right. All right, this poll, I just want to know about what your plan is. So no right answer. I just want to know what folks are thinking. I decided to do a little bit of a test in my household. My husband dropped off his ballot in person. I decided to mail it in, and we have some bets as to where it's going to be and are tracking them. So I'm curious what other people are doing. So we have some people that are voting in person alone. We have some people that are voting in person with family and friends. That is great and what I like to see. And we have a fair amount of people that are actually working that day as an election defender or a poll observer. And I already voted watching the results, which is 87%, amazing. And I also know that that actually matches up really well with the amazing historical trend that we're seeing in the country. So I am not too surprised by this. And I'm happy to see that we have a fair amount of people that are also working that day, and just want to say thank you for everything that you do. So just watching a few more trickle in. Once we hit 95, I'll end it so that you can share and see results. And I'm so thankful for people that are chiming in right now, talking about how you're dropping lit off, how you are supporting voters who might feel intimidated. That is incredible and just so reflective of the Women's March and our mission and our base. So thank you. Incredible. All right, so I'm just gonna end the poll and share it. So hopefully you can see what some of your friends here on the chat are doing. So 2 people that are voting in person alone, and I trust and know that you will find community there in person and you won't be lonely. And 6% are voting in person and made a plan, 8% are working that day, and then 86% are voting and watching the results. And also there's some people that already voted and are also working that day. So thank you all so much. So with that, I am actually going to turn it over to Kelsey and Christina. So Allison, you can stop sharing your screen, and we can get going.
Great. So I will just say a couple words and then turn it over to Kelsey. I am so excited that we had the opportunity to work with Women's March and all of you on this program. You know, this is such a historic moment with a very rocky and difficult election period, as well as the last 4 years. And yet here we are, you know, almost on the eve of the opportunity to use democracy as it should be exercised. And I just wanted to put extra emphasis on the activity that you are about to embark on. You know, we are going to see just a tsunami of disinformation and misinformation on election day and beyond. There is going to, you know, be a waiting period in order to have a full picture of what we're really looking at, and the patience necessary for that period will be really important. And so how people interact online and how we try to debunk and deal with and channel that can only happen by, you know, the grassroots digital activists like yourself who are here. So I just wanted to say thank you for, you know, spending this time in your evening being part of this. I think the lesson that I have learned from being involved in many years of elections in many different places around the world is that democracy is in fact a journey, not a destination. And it starts and ends with the people and the way that we choose to conduct ourselves online and offline, and the civic discourse that we need to bring back to this country to, you know, have civility again, and to be able to push forward for issues that we care about and hold close to our heart. So thank you for taking the time to do this, and thank you for letting us, Nora and team, be a part of this effort.
All right, and with that, I am going to pull up some slides and walk you all through what we have been seeing in our monitoring and what we expect to see over the next few days and on election day. And oh good, my PowerPoint's going to freeze right now. This will just take a minute and then we will be back. You would think my computer's also like realizing we're 5 days out and is tired like the rest of us. Okay, here we go. What to expect. So we only have 5 days left. At this point, if you're on the East Coast, our day is basically over. It's basically 4 days. I know everyone is feeling like really anxious ahead of Tuesday. If you are like me, you are just like refreshing the 538 website every hour and just like, you know, ready to get this thing moving. So I wanted to just take a few minutes that I hope will help you all feel as relaxed and prepared as possible. So I want to talk through what my team expects to see on social media leading up to and on election day. And then we can talk through what to do if you see this stuff, and a few resources that you can bookmark and just have handy and ready to go. So hopefully you sort of feel like you have a plan of action ahead of time. And obviously Noor and the digital defenders are going to give you guys lots of ways to get involved beyond this as well. So let's start with the key narratives that we are thinking about and concerned with. Just to be clear, this is far from, you know, all of the narratives that we expect to see on social media, but these are sort of the core buckets of content that we want to watch for that could potentially change things offline or affect the election in any way. There will definitely be a lot of other content on social media, including disinformation content that can be ignored. So hopefully this will help you all sort of cut through the noise. So I want to start by talking about voter suppression. We've talked about this before, but we sort of define voter suppression as anything that has the goal of keeping people from voting. And so usually that means, content that tries to make it more confusing or more intimidating to vote. We basically always see this content pop up on or like just before election day. We've seen it in primaries throughout this year. So we're not seeing a ton of it right now, but we just kind of know it's coming. This can look a few different ways. I've outlined 3 key buckets here. First, we expect to see false claims around voting rules. Voting can be confusing anytime, especially this year. So we expect that bad actors are probably going to try to exploit confusion around the rules. So we might see disinformation over like how to present identification or whether you need identification at the polls, whether masks are required. We've even seen in the past claims that if you voted for a losing primary candidate, that you're not allowed to vote for the winner of the general election, anything like that. The second is any false information about the process, like dates and times. We often see bad actors spreading claims that the polls are closing early or trying to trick people into thinking that the day for voting has changed. In the Wisconsin primary this year, for example, we saw some social media accounts saying, too bad the polls close at 5 p.m. this year, when in fact they closed at 8 p.m. And a few accounts with high numbers of followers retweeted that to try to spread that. The third thing we might see are false claims of last minute changes. So these are claims like, hey, the power's out, everyone head to this location instead, when we know that that isn't true. This is hard because we know that there can be, and there often are, last minute changes on election day for various reasons. And so that's something that bad actors might try to exploit. So if you see any of this stuff online, just try to check it with a legitimate source. In terms of responding or reacting to voter suppression content when you encounter it, just a few things to keep in mind. First is, report any of that content to the social media platforms. There's a way you can flag it through Facebook or Twitter or any of the other platforms. Know that the platforms are like pretty bad at this, at removing these things on time, but they're under a bit more pressure this year, so maybe they'll act a little bit more quickly. It is still, either way, it's still important to get that content removed. And so we really encourage people to flag that when they see it. The second thing is to report any offline attempts to voter suppression to election protection hotlines. 866 Our Vote is a big one that's run by Common Cause. And they have a website and also a bunch of phone numbers that we have here. So we are encouraging people to use this 866 Our Vote hotline for anything that's taking place at a polling station or that needs to be resolved on election day. So this could be anything like answering voters' questions about voting, reporting any issues that take place at a polling station, any voter intimidation or attempts to keep people from voting. So even if you see these things on social media, if they appear to be taking place in person at a polling station, we want election protection experts to handle that. And then the third thing is we can be proactive about this by sharing accurate information with our networks, and that can help drown out the disinformation with facts about voting. So the next sort of bucket of disinformation that we're thinking about is focused on claims of voter fraud. We sort of define this as anything where the goal is to undermine trust in the election results. This is the stuff that maybe is not going to have an immediate impact on election day and on whether or not people are able to actually cast a ballot, but it will be really critical for this post-election period when we are counting votes and declaring winners. We have been seeing a ton of voter fraud content related to vote by mail all year long. So we expect bad actors to continue this and revert to their usual efforts to claim fraud is occurring in person on election day. There are a lot of other ways that this kind of content can look, but there's sort of 4 buckets of voter fraud content that are most prominent. First, you might see claims of cheating, fraud, claims of interference or foreign interference. Maybe we see claims that someone is voting twice using different people's names. Second, you might see claims of voting machine issues. So like claims that voting machines are switching someone's vote after they cast their ballot. Third would be attacks on election officials or election workers. For example, claims that those workers are partisan or are marking ballots or doing something wrong that could change the results. And fourth would be claims of ineligible voters voting. For example, attacks that undocumented people are casting ballots, for example. This is hard because some of these things might occur, actually occur. And so these could be based in real things, but we want to have an eye out for whether these things are backed by evidence or seem real, or whether they seem to have a goal of casting doubt on the integrity of the election. And so for this kind of content, a few things for responding. First, you can report this content to disinformation researchers. Groups like us, and there are other groups who do this work. We are doing a lot of monitoring on trends and trying to keep an eye on anything that's going to lay the groundwork to contest this election. So there is a website called reportdisinfo.org that's also run by Common Cause, where people can report anything that they see that is, potentially an issue related to voting. We can also, stress to our networks that the best way to protect our democracy is to vote in high numbers and to count every vote. We know that election night might not be results night this year, and that's okay. We can trust that every ballot will be counted. When we do see this stuff and we need to respond to it, it's more important to discredit the messengers by talking about their motives and what they're trying to do and why they are saying these things. And that's usually better than trying to play whack-a-mole with every claim that comes your way. Bad actors are afraid that voters, are going to make their voices heard, and they're trying to undermine our faith in the results. And so we need to call them out on that. And then the last thing, this is a little bit less important for just like people who are just out in the world, but in general, we want to hold the press accountable for reporting results. And so if you start to see journalists who are reporting results too early, before other, especially like any sort of far right or highly partisan outlets, we want to do our best to say, it's too early. We want election officials to count every vote before we let people declare results. Okay, let's talk about voter intimidation and threats. This is a little bit more clear-cut and includes content that could intimidate voters away from voting. It's worth noting that this could be attributed to either the left or the right, so this is not necessarily partisan. For example, in 2018, there were claims that the new Black Panther Party was intimidating voters to vote for Stacey Abrams in Georgia. We've also seen, claims that Trump supporters were disrupting early voting, so this could really come either way. We also know that there are extremists who do this every election, who genuinely try to threaten voters out of casting their ballot. And so we have to know that these reports could be a mix of real things that are happening or mischaracterized, decontextualized things that are sort of hard to understand or don't look the way they appear on social media. And some of these things could be entirely false. And so again, you want to look for people who can validate these claims when you see them and report them to election officials when you need to. In terms of responding to this stuff, report any threatening content to the social media platforms for removal. Report any intimidation attempts to election protection hotlines like 866-OUR-VOTE. If anything looks potentially violent or threatening, report that to the authorities if you need to. Really important here is to be very careful with engaging with these reports. We see this every election where people start to share false rumors of extremists mobilizing, and this can ultimately result in more voters being afraid and staying home. So don't amplify these threats when you see them or give them a bigger megaphone. That only helps bad actors. And then again, we want to be really careful about how the media is reporting on voter intimidation. The press unfortunately loves to basically profile extremists, but we want to reward journalists who are, focusing their coverage on the communities impacted and are giving information that, discredits these groups and reinforces voting resources. And then the last group of content that we expect to see are these sort of Hail Mary attempts to distract us. And I'm not going to get too in the weeds on that, but just know that bad actors have been doing a lot of this lately. They are sort of amplifying conspiracies or really wild claims to distract us and shift the conversation away from what people actually care about. So this could happen on election day. You could see claims of like major corruptions or scandals that implicate candidates, allegedly breaking news with no evidence, or conspiracies to undermine voting. There's been a bunch of this in the past week that I'm sure you've seen, and there could be new stuff that pops up. Don't take the bait on this nonsense. It's really important that we stay focused on our core issues, including getting out the vote and making sure that every vote is counted. Any engagement with this stuff just helps bad actors. And so, if anything does come up that merits a response, I know the digital defenders will be right on top of letting you all know. The media is starting to make sure that it is being more careful about the way it reports on this stuff. And so we should take their lead and really look to responsible journalists to help us figure out what is real and what is sort of worth responding to when we see it. And that's it from me.
Thank you, Kelsey. Christina, do you have anything to add? If not, we're going to get into the how-to section, but I want to give you a minute if you have anything else. All right. So let's get into the what we're doing and how we're doing it. So uh, firstly, why us, why now, our vision and our purpose. When we're talking about digital defenders, this program's actually been going on for a little bit over a year. And while right now we're focusing on election disinformation, because of course we're in election season, we've actually worked on correcting disinformation um, on many different issues, including reproductive rights, climate, immigration, COVID-19. So we have an existing group of already trained activists that are our support system and do this work on a daily basis. Again, if you're here in this space, it's because you are active on social media. That doesn't mean you need to have 1,000 followers. That doesn't mean that you need to be an influencer, but it means that you are somewhat communicative online. You have some friends and family. You follow some groups. You're maybe used to logging onto Twitter or follow some interesting accounts, and you have actually been witnessing some narratives around the election season that you want to push back against. So if you're that person, you're in the right place. The second piece is that a big goal of this, and I would say the central goal, is that we want to make more visible, accurate information. We want to make visible, accurate, positive, progressive values, and we feel like this is the best way to actually shift public opinion, whether that is around climate, whether that is around safe abortion access, whether that is around immigration and whether families should stay together, whether they should cross the border and are welcome here. And right now, whether it's okay for you to go vote and whether your vote will be counted, right? So this is part of a long journey that we're going to be on together. And right now, we're really, really focusing on election season. Lastly, the internet is important. The internet is a high stakes playground, whether we're talking about news outlets or blogs, whether we're talking about tweets from public officials or certain administrations, whether we're seeing hashtags on Twitter get hijacked, whether we're seeing Photoshop images or doctored images, right? It can be really overwhelming. So we don't want you to feel like you have to tackle every single thing. The purpose of Digital Defenders is to give you what you need to be able to be yourself. We're not asking you to form a new social media account or come up with an alias handle. We're asking you to be yourselves and to watch out for what you're seeing in your own networks, right? This isn't something that is just something that's generated by the right wing. It's also what we're seeing amongst our own friends and family. And that's important because disinformation is just that expansive. It is actually just that broad. And it's going to take all of us to be able to put the right information out to actually be able to change the narrative. So we can move on to the next slide. All right, so what's our process? So Digital Defenders, number one, you're in this space because we're going to learn a little bit about how we actually push back against some of those narratives that Kelsey and Christina just went over, and how to actually use content, whether that is text, whether that's a fun GIF. And I would love to hear in the chat if you use GIFs or like GIFs, because we have a lot of them, whether it's smart memes, whether it's an infographic with accurate information. You are going to be trained in spotting that disinformation threat and actually responding to it with creativity. Right? So we've been working really hard to make some very, very beautiful and fun and sparkly. Oh, we have a GIF queen in the chat. Amazing. That's just what I needed. So we're going to be putting all of that into your hands so you can roll with it and own it. Number two, we have a continually updated disinformation manual. So we'll get into that. What that tells you is what you respond to each threat with, right? So if we're talking around voter intimidation, it will give you the exact number that you can actually call or share on your Facebook or Twitter for people to be able to report to a hotline, much like what Kelsey just went over, right? So we have a piece by piece, step by step manual that's going to talk you through exactly what you need to do and when. And finally, daily engagement on Slack. So when you signed up for this, hopefully you saw our disclaimer. What this training does, and to be a digital defender, we are just bringing you into an existing world where we communicate on a platform called Slack. And if you have used Slack before, feel free to put it in the chat, or if you've heard about it, and you feel open to learning it, you can also put that in the chat. But that's our app that we use to communicate with each other, where we actively put out GIFs and content and monitor trending topics. So we do expect that everybody that does actually graduate from today's training and becomes part of the Digital Defenders program uses it. So that is Slack, and that's our home, and where we
I think we've lost Noor. Oh, Allison's going to step in. All right.
Everyone, sorry about that. Nora's just frozen right now. So Nora was just talking about daily engagement on Slack and the idea of all of us working in through different channels and different ways that we can necessarily engage with each other while also keeping it really structured and organized. So you'll see later that the Slack channel is going to have lots of different graphics for you to share, but also a way for you guys to communicate with each other and share everything that's going on with you guys. I'm seeing a lot of stuff in the chat about I've never used it before, I like it. So it's really super intuitive and it's really easy for everyone to engage together. There we go.
All right, I am back. Sorry, my internet froze up. I hope I didn't get us too off track. But Allison, we could move to the next slide, and hopefully I am unfrozen now. Thank you all. All right, so election day themes. Some of the things that we are going to be noticing, and some of you are already mentioning this in the chat, right? Is concerns around voter intimidation at the polls. That's real, and we're not here to tell you not to be scared. That's all right. But we are here to help you think about solidarity and some collective tactics to actually be able to mitigate some of those concerns, right? Another piece is long lines and lack of social distancing. So one thing that we have been doing over at the Women's March is bring folks into an active election defenders program with Working Families Party and the Movement for Black Lives. And I know some folks in the chat are involved, and they're people that are going to be handing out PPE, going to be handing out water, and making sure that that social distancing is something that is taken into mind in some of those long lines, right? And I would say if you are planning on going and voting in person, there's a small number of people that still had to vote when we polled earlier. Take a few masks with you. If you have access to them, take them with you. Something I've gotten used to is actually just going up to people saying, hey, if you need a mask, just let me know. I'm right here. Another one is false claims of victory. So Kelsey went over this, right? So a lack of understanding about vote counting. It's a pretty complicated process, right? So how can we unpack that and sort of realize all the different types of votes that have to be counted, and why it is actually a little bit different in 2020, like a lot of things are different in 2020, right? And then lastly, distrust of the election process and also election officials. I know we have some people that are actually officials and or involved in the election process in the chat, and I know that you all could use some serious love and appreciation and motivation, and also an understanding from people about the amount of work that actually goes into becoming an election official. So part of our work is also explaining to people that the system does exist, regardless of right-wing attempts to tell us that it doesn't. So we can move on to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about what type of disinformation threat we might be facing, and to give you some examples of how to respond to it. So I'll deal with the one that we're seeing the most of right now, false claims of victory. We've seen this many times, but this year more than ever, it is something we need to pay attention to. Any claim of an electoral victory before all votes have been tallied and a legitimate result has been officially verified, right? It's something that we're expecting this year for a few different reasons, and I'm gonna go over that. So you want to meet false claims of an election victory with accurate information around the vote counting process, right? Take your time to explain it to people. Mail-in ballots will take longer to count, and in many states, you actually have to wait until after the polls close. Every vote must be counted in order to certify a winner. You want to respond with determination and explain the counting process. And again, as I mentioned, you also want to uplift election officials whose job it is and who work really, really hard to ensure that our democratic process is respected. So how you respond to this, and when you're seeing me refer to channel, that refers back to Slack. So again, this is not something you have access to right now. This is something you will get after this training is over, is an invite to Slack, as well as a copy to our disinformation manual that has all of this in great detail, right? So we would invite you to look at the focus section on our Slack app, or look at the enthusiasm focus in our disinformation manual, and uplift content around counting every vote, or about motivating and trusting our election officials. Some of the sample messages that we might want to uplift is election results are not final until we've counted every vote. Easy and simple, and I have been saying this again and again to people that I actually do think are like trusted, that are voting but might be feeling anxious, right? So there's no harm in reiterating this as much as possible, especially on election day. Secondly, mail-in ballots will take longer to count, and we want to emphasize that that's because the process is working. We actually want things to take as long as they should, and that's our right. And again, if you are in a state where you might have access to information around how many mail-in ballots were already cast, I know that we are already getting some of this information from around the country. You want to be pointing to that and lifting that up, saying, hey, actually, this is a lot of ballots. I hope they're actually being counted, and it's okay that it's going to take a while. You also could point to the fact that we have seen historically high numbers of absentee ballots this year, and it may take some more time to count all the votes. And also, we may not know the final election results on election night this year. I like to think that it's not less of a may, and it is a we're not going to know. But that's 100% okay, and I want them to count every vote. Lastly, counting every vote from every eligible voter this year is more important than speedy election results, right? So if somebody's saying, oh, yep, I'm watching these exit polls, or hey, this is what I saw here, say, hey, but do you know if every vote was actually counted? Do you have any updates on the mail-in ballots or the absentee ballots? Is there any further information that you know about that, right? So those are some of the key themes and questions that you want to ask yourself, and you also want to ask the person you're engaging with. For me, the person I engage in this conversation with is a fellow activist, is actually somebody who I work with every single day, and we do some really, really good GOTV work together, right? But that doesn't mean that we're not all scared about this stuff. So we're not coming from a place of like expertise or I know better than you. This is stuff that all of us are feeling. This is stuff that all of us are feeling. And why we're here is to help demystify that and help each other. So we can move to the next slide. So I want to talk through some voter suppression. It doesn't just happen leading up to the election, right? We're also talking about stuff that we might see that day. Something I've experienced myself is a lot of confusion around what it means around your polling locations to be open or closed, or even checking polling location opening and closing times or locations. We know that some polling locations might actually have changed or shifted because of COVID, because of schools closing or rec centers. You want to actively look up when accurate polling location opening and closing times are. And secondly, you might see some information around when to stay in line or when to leave in line, right? And I think these long lines really do speak to how hard it is to vote in this country and how difficult they make it for us to be able to vote in this country. But also something that we can reiterate is that if you're in line when the polls close, you get to still vote. Tell the people around you, tell the person in front of you and the person behind you, right? If you're in line when the polls close, stay in line. Number two, I've been seeing a lot of really amazing solidarity with people in those long lines, right? So what can you do to keep each other motivated? I saw a lot of selfies and photos this line from people that were voting on October 24th for vote early day. And a lot of them were frustrated. A lot of them were scared. A lot of them were sad. What can you do? You can say, we know it's not easy to deal with long lines. We're rooting for you and we're right here with you. We're awake And let me know when you've cast your vote so I can say thank you to you and just do a check-in with them. This isn't you talk, this could be you talking to a stranger. It can also be you talking to a friend, right? And of course, sharing accurate information on opening or closing time. And then on to the next one, please. Voter intimidation. So a lot of people are talking about this. I know Kelsey went over this. And again, it's real, right? We are living in some unprecedented, scary times. And it's 100% all right to feel concerned. So number one, you don't want to respond with condescension. You also don't want to necessarily respond with language that may instill additional fear, right? You want to actually be responding with messages of solidarity and understanding and collective determination, and giving people the tools that do exist for them to be able to actually report some of what they're seeing. And again, we are seeing a lot more people actually organize on the ground election defense this year. That means that we might actually have some more organized poll observers or people that are making sure that PPE is being distributed, right? So if you see them, lean on them. And I'm seeing a few people also write in the chat that either you're involved or you know some folks that are involved. So ways to respond to that: when you are on Slack or in the disinformation manual, we have a know your rights and the laws section in the disinformation manual that tells you basic things around, hey, if I made an error, what's my right to ask for a new ballot, right? How do you do that? Number two, if I see something or say something, or I see somebody do something that isn't, that I'm curious about or suspicious about, how can I look up if that's okay or not okay? And of course, what hotlines exist or what websites exist where you can record the incident or report it. So that is our focus in how we respond to this. We also know that there are actually some people-powered ways that people are thinking about solidarity at the polls, right? Going in groups, maybe keeping a few of the numbers or websites listed and with you so that you're able to respond. And also when you get there, maybe checking out if there are some poll observers that are friendly, that are around you, or election defenders, and just figuring out where they are so that if you need them, you can immediately call them, right? So there's some things that you can do when you're there, and there's also some things that you can do to prepare. So with that, I wanted to walk us through this matrix specifically, because this is actually what the base is for our entire program, and also what we're going to be doing together. And that's right, Wendy. It is in multiple languages. I know that they have Arabic. I know that they have Spanish and a few other languages as well. So with that, you can move to the next slide, Allison. The one before that, actually. Yep. All right, so we are going to review the disinformation manual. So when I say that this is what you should look at, this is our home. This is something you'll see when you get in Slack. You'll see it everywhere. We'll be really annoying about it to bring you all of the information that we're seeing, everything that we went over here in this presentation, and gives you literally verbatim what you can copy and paste into your own social media. You can customize it to make it sound more like you, but it's something that you have at your fingertips. All right. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Allison, to walk people through how to use the disinformation manual. And get using.
Great. So can everyone hear me okay? Great. So I'm going to go into now our disinformation manual. All right, so this is what it looks like. You'll see the Digital Defenders Manual at the top, and this is just your basic textbook, your guideline for anything you want to post online. Any kind of copy or language or any kind of images that you can proactively use to fight against disinformation. So on the left here, you'll see there's like a skeleton, like an outline, and this is going to be a much easier way to navigate this entire large document. And you'll see it's broken up in different sections. So first up here, we have all the Digital Defenders graphics, so that way you know like this is where every single graphic is. So above it, we have the how to use media online. So this is like a very simple table if you forget something from the webinar, if you're confused by how to post. And then we have our pre-election phase, which is everything leading up to the election. We have our election phase, which we're gearing up for. And then we have our post-election phase, which we're not in yet. We're just gearing up for election. But then you'll see that there's subcategories within each phase that we're in. So let's start up at the top with how to use media online. So here we have a really simple graph explaining the type of images and media that we can use. So every single Facebook post, every single Instagram post, Twitter, everything can have text. It can have regular typing, as opposed to the only one YouTube comments can't have graphics. So a graphic is like a still flat image. If you've ever seen an image online, if you've ever seen somebody post a doodle that they uploaded themselves, anything like that. So that would be a graphic. And you can post that everywhere except YouTube comments. Whereas a link is a URL, a link is google.com, it's facebook.com, it's a website you can go to. And you can post links everywhere on Facebook posts, on Twitter posts, on Twitter replies, and YouTube comments, but you cannot do it in an Instagram post or Twitter reply. Or sorry, a Facebook story and Instagram story. And then we have GIFs. So GIFs are those animated moving images you've ever seen. Sometimes they're fun, sometimes they're quirky, sometimes they have language, sometimes they have just illustrations, anything that's like that animated short, quick 5-second moving image, that's a GIF. And that's slightly different from a sticker. If you have Instagram, maybe you've seen someone post an animated moving image, except it has more of a transparent background on it. So a GIF it's in a box and it has a flat background as opposed to a sticker, which is transparent and you can just pop it on. And the two places that you can do that are on Facebook stories and Instagram stories. So again, refer to this part if you're confused by what's really what, how do I use it? And then if you are confused by GIFs in general, how to post, here's another video that I have explaining how to post GIFs on Instagram. And then I will also demonstrate later. So then let's see. All right, let's start with the pre-election phase and explaining what's in this phase. So we have it broken down to facts, enthusiasm and trust, safety, tools, and identity. So these are different kinds of threats that we've identified as really important for this election. So then under facts, we have voting plans, important election dates, changes to the voting process, and vote early process. So the facts is really fighting a lot of just plain outright wrong information that is objective or information that's objective, dates that can't be tampered with, deadlines and rules that are strict and completely specific to your state. Then we have enthusiasm and trust. So this is more about combating the cynicism that comes along with the election, with the voting process, with government in general, and reintroducing a lot of that neighborhood community feeling into, hey, your poll workers are actually your neighbors and your friends. They're not random people that you don't know who are high up government officials. And it's a lot of encouraging people to also vote together. It's encouraging graphics and links and tweets that are more about making sure that people know that they're stronger in numbers. Then we have our safety category. So then this one is all about fighting that really uncomfortable feeling that this election particularly brings about voter intimidation, and how you can protect yourself, but also how you can support specifically Black and brown lives, trans lives who are at a much higher risk of voter intimidation. And then this safety also kind of treads into our election day phase, which I will talk about in a minute. Then we have our tools category. This folder is all about just the national resources that you can use. They're ballot trackers. They're just cute things that you can send to anyone in the country, anyone you know, without having to worry about certain guidelines or states that you can use and just spread really good fighting disinformation online. And then identity is disinformation specifically targeted at certain groups based on the color of their skin, the language they speak, their sexuality. And so that's what everything under identity is. It's very specific for targeting marginalized groups. So then that's everything that's in the pre-election phase, but we also have new buckets now in the election phase. So it's called the focus, which is this one subcategory, and then the know your rights. So under focus, that's all about maintaining the idea that we do not want to be paying attention to any bad actors. We don't want to be distracted by people calling results early. We want to really make sure that we're determined, which is the first subcategory, we are patient and understanding that this is going to take a long time to count every ballot, that we're going to see a lot of uncomfortable and icky disinformation online, and that we avoid as many distractions as possible, like exit polls or just completely wrong information about how the election is going. And then under Know Your Rights, this is a really simple, straightforward, these are written laws that exist that you have to pay attention to when you're voting, and they're different voter intimidation phone numbers. So I think someone had mentioned the different phone numbers. Here's one graphic with the languages. And then knowing your rights. So these are basic voting rights that everyone is granted, that everyone should know that no one can stop you from voting. And that's what this subcategory under election, the election phases. So now that you've seen it all, it's pretty hefty. So make sure you're using the outline so you can better organize everything that you're doing. And then you'll notice that underneath every category, there's a lot of little hashtags. So based on the category you're in, there are different hashtags that best suit to that category, to that folder. So I'm just going to take you into one of these folders just so you can take a look of like what you're looking at, where you're going, where you're clicking. So let's say I want to go into enthusiasm and trust. I want to talk about poll workers. I'm seeing a lot of threats about poll workers. So then I'm going to go into my enthusiasm folder, and you'll see if you hover over it, it'll show you what's going to be inside of that. I'll click it. And then you'll see different folders. So if you look back at the manual, election heroes, poder para la gente, and vote together. And there they are. So let's say I go to election hero and I see, oh, I like this one. Poll workers make democracy work. That's really cute. I like that. So then that's how you would go about just a specific folder if that's the kind of threat you're seeing. So now I'm going to show you how to take an image from our manual and then download it and then post it to Twitter and Facebook. All right, so let's see. I want to do something around, let's say, voter intimidation. I like this one. I'm looking through it, I'm scrolling through it, and I like this one that says, I refuse to back down and be silenced, hashtag my vote, my voice. I like that. Twitter is really good with hashtags. So let's see what the image is. I hover over it. I like it. It's colorful. We won't be intimidated. We will vote. Very cool. So let's see. I'm going to hover over it again, just double check, and I'm going to click on it. And then you'll see that it's animated. So this is a GIF, and you'll see on the top left that the bottom or the last three letters are .gif. That's a GIF. So I'm going to go to my right, and I'm going to see this little arrow that has like a arrow with a bottom bracket, and that's the download button. So I'm going to download it. It's going to be saved to my download folder. So I'm going to go right into Twitter. And just like you were writing any other tweet, you would go here, what's happening. And then I'm going to go back into my manual, which says, I refuse to back down. I can copy and paste it because I like how it is. Right click, copy, right click, paste. Boom, and my hashtag is already there. So now is where I get to add the image. So this is a little image icon that I just downloaded, and there's my GIF that I want. We won't be intimidated. We will vote. I'm going to open it, and boom, there it is. So then that's how I like it. It looks good. I'm going to press tweet. And there it is. Perfect. And it's animated as I'm scrolling, so you don't have to press play or anything. So now we're going to do the same exact thing for Facebook, but Facebook is just a little bit different. So this is where we need to pay attention. So it's the same thing as if you were going to write a Facebook post, the same exact thing. What's on your mind, Allison? So I really liked this language here. So I'm going to copy and paste it. Except Facebook, it can be useful, but we want to keep these graphics and this link to ourselves. It already sees that the word refuse is linked to something, and I don't want that. This is a manual for us to use. So I'm going to press the X because I want to get rid of it for a second. Delete the word refuse, type it again. So you'll see that there's no blue line anymore. It's not hyperlinked anymore. And that's what I want. And I'm going to add the image in myself from my downloads folder, just like I did on Twitter. So I'm going to go to photo/video, add in my We Won't Be Intimidated GIF, which I download, which again is in my downloads folder. Open it. And there it is. So I'm going to press post. And then go to my page. Then we just check that it's there. Hold on. well, it'll come back soon, but you can just refresh your page and then you'll see that the image, the animation will be, there it is, perfect. And it says, I refuse to back down, be silenced, hashtag my vote, my voice. And just a little quick thing about hashtags. The reason why we use hashtags is to categorize certain information. So if I did something hashtag BLM, that would mean that my photo and the 3 million other photos that were posted yesterday, today, for all of time will be categorized under this BLM. So that's what that hashtag is. It's almost like a tab folder for Instagram, for Facebook, and Twitter. All right, so let's go back to the manual. And then, of course, if you see something here and you kind of copy your language that doesn't already have a hashtag, feel free to pick one that you like here that works. These are really popular ones that are really great in that category. And of course, just to focus just one thing under the election folder, a lot of this language is from ASO. They were fantastic. They have a lot of information and writing on how we can really pay attention to what's going on in our areas and our own communities, as well as nationally, and stay focused and stay head on about counting every single vote. And the reason why the election phase is so crucial is because even though it's only one day, that day is going to be so filled with disinformation, so many subjective things on the internet that are personalized, they're localized, community-based, or sometimes they're nationally blown up. And it's really, really important that we keep our heads focused on, and our eye on the ball, and make sure that we're patient, counting every ballot, and encouraging our people in our circle to really make sure that every vote is counted, and we want it that way. Great, so I can turn it back to Noor onto the slides.
Great. Thank you all so much. So getting a few questions in the chat, and before we go into the Q&A for the last 8 minutes, I did want to just have us think through, to think through like why we're doing this, right? Some of the questions that I'm getting are, all right, so are you asking me to engage with right-wing websites where I'm going to get harassed? Absolutely not. Like that is not, we are not sending you into the dungeons of the internet. We are asking you to engage in a way that is right for you, right? Whether that's existing social media platforms, your own Facebook, your own social media, right? You don't have to identify yourself as Women's March Digital Defender or anything. The purpose of this is to keep it organic, to keep it quick, to get the information out that you're seeing that needs a response, right? So that's the purpose of this. It's not to have a trained group of robots, saying the exact same thing, but also getting yourself into some situations where you have to engage with bad actors. That's absolutely not the purpose. And while we do see some bad actors, a lot of the election disinformation that we're seeing is also being shared by our own networks, right? So something that we saw earlier, and I think it was maybe Brienne who had earlier asked this question is, yeah, I'm seeing a lot of this actually come up from my own networks, from Democrats, from people that might identify center or liberal, because disinformation is not, while it's something that might be generated from the right wing, it is actually something that all of us are susceptible to, right? And it's something that all of us have to combat and be ready for. And again, I think just a few other like logistics questions that are coming up from folks is you don't need to have a big social media following, right? This is something that you're incorporating into your own life leading up to the election and on election day to reach the people in your network, right? When we think about organizing, you think about the people that you can actually mobilize, right? So that is what this is about, is even if you have 20 people on your friends list, that is 20 people that are seeing something that might change their minds or might encourage them to get out the vote or fight for every vote to be counted that wouldn't have seen that before. And that is why doing this work on the internet is important. So I'm just gonna very quickly just share my screen to show you all what Slack looks like. And while I am doing that, I am going to encourage you to, number one, get familiar with Slack. Maybe look through, and Samantha, if you wouldn't mind making me co-host for a second, that would be great. So something that you want to be ready for is a Slack invite. That is, again, not something you have yet. There are a lot of people that are saying, hey, where's my invite? that actually is not something that you have yet. And this is what Slack actually looks like. So what you see here is the Digital Defender Slack. There are a few different channels, right? So when we were talking about enthusiasm or uplifting some of our election heroes, that's what you'll see. You'll go to the enthusiasm channel for. Facts, that's where you spread accurate information. When there's know your rights, that's where you can find information around what your rights actually are at the polls. Questions, that's where you can ask questions if you need help troubleshooting something, right? So you're going to be entering this workspace with a lot of other people. Again, you can't actually access this until you're done with this training. So you will get a link in your email. Look out for your email to join Slack. And once you're in Slack, you'll be able to look at the manual and get the Google Drive. So that's not something that we're sending right away. You have to join Slack first, and that's where it'll be at. So with that, I am hoping that we can answer some questions. So Samantha, would you like me to just pick the ones to answer live? There's a few ones.
That sounds great.
All right, I can go ahead. So number one, are we going to have some factual references to share? So Jamie, in the disinformation manual, we actually have a lot of infographics, a lot of real facts, cut and dry, that aren't going to change, right? About how votes are counted, or what election officials' jobs are, or what some accurate websites are where you can find out opening or closing locations. So all of that is definitely in the disinformation manual once you join Slack. So I 100% understand. I don't even use GIFs that much myself, so I hear you. So another one that I am seeing is so this is a really good question. For any images or GIFs, is there alt text that we can use? That is a really good question. So with all of our images or GIFs, it's actually derived directly from the copy in the manual. I do think that in order to be more accessible, we should have some alternative text and image descriptions. So that's a really good point that we can incorporate. So thank you for that. And this manual is continually updated. So we try to update it every day with new themes that we're seeing. So yes, you'll know when it's updated, and we'll definitely let you know on Slack as well once we are seeing something new come up that we want to help you all out with. And I am wondering, Kelsey or Christina, if you wouldn't mind answering this question around voter suppression and safety. So I am putting this question up now, which is, I would think that the militia is a means to suppress voting. How should one deal? What are some voter safety tactics that you're seeing people talk about?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a couple things with this, and it kind of depends on how you're encountering this. If you're just seeing like content on social media that is showing militias, or if you're seeing social media content that, you know, is planning like militia movement to intimidate voters, definitely report that stuff on social media, you know, and report it to Report Disinfo if you're seeing it. I will say, like, sometimes bad actors will like throw this stuff into like Reddit or sort of spaces because they want people to overreact to it. So it's one thing if you're seeing things on social media, it's another thing if you're seeing something in person, or if things are being validated by people at a polling station. So I would, you know, go into it knowing that sometimes this content is just meant to scare us, and sometimes it's a real threat, and it's hard to know which is which at different times. So first thing to do is sort of think through those things. And then obviously, you know, for any potential in-person organization efforts that could have an impact at a polling place, that's a really good place to engage one of those hotlines, because they will have lawyers and poll monitors who can help to deal with those issues when they show up in person. And then don't, you know, engage with that content on social media further. We don't want to scare more people. You don't want to push that out or give a bigger megaphone to the people who are trying to scare us on social media.
Thank you, Kelsey. I heard somebody say this earlier: de-amplify the right wing, amplify voters, right? We want to center us at every given point. So thank you for the way you frame that. We should be proud of us with everything that 2020 has given us. to still believe in and fight for a better country for us all. So last thing I'll say is we have a few folks that are wondering, hey, you know, do we want to be thinking about our presence? Do we want to be thinking about where we engage? And I encourage you, some of these conversations are happening in places that you might not expect, right? So some of those places might be, for me, that's Nextdoor. I don't know if some of you use Nextdoor. It's an app that is kind of controversial, where a lot of neighbors talk about things in their community. That is actually where I'm seeing most of the voter disinformation actually happen, because it's something that I can actually respond to in my own zip code, right? So you want to just be looking out for some of those things. You also want to be looking out for other neighborhood blogs or pages, even comment threads that might be on a different news site, right? I know I'm very brave when it comes to Nextdoor. I do not recommend, I don't recommend spending all your time on it. But all that to say, yes, respond to different threads. Just respond to different threads on other people's pages, but also share this information actively on your own social media. That's what it's about, right? So post something every day, and you're still reaching more people than you might be on a daily basis, right? So with that, look out for Slack. Look out for a Slack invite that you're going to get in your inboxes. Please accept the invite, and then we're going to welcome you onto Slack and get you acquainted with the channels. Make sure you have the manual if you haven't seen it yet, and we're going to take it from there, right? So thank you all so much for your time and your energy and all of our communal expertise. Thank you, Kelsey and Christina and Allison. And I look forward to working together with you and seeing you over in the digital universe. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.